My name is Craig Gilgrass, and to my left is my esteemed colleague James McManus, and we're going to spend the next 3 hours taking you through Workforce for ArcGIS. Just want to see who is paying. Woo, we got a woo, all right. Just wanted to see who is paying attention. Just 60 minutes with us. All right, well, let's get going. So Workforce is one of the apps in our field operations suite. And this is a slide that you might have seen or seen sort of variations of this slide over the years. And really, this kind of encapsulates and describes how we look at field operations and the different solutions and products that we deliver. And I just kind of want to talk about some of the different sections of this to lay a bit of the foundation for what we're going to talk about and show over the next 60 minutes. On the left-hand side of the slide, what you've really got there are the 5 different guiding buckets and bins that we think about when we look at field operations. Really, when you look at all of the work that you do with respect to field operations and your users in the field, you can break down all the different types of work that they're doing, the information they're collecting, into these 5 different areas that are up there. And each of those really describes, the different types of apps that we make available. So Workforce is the one that we're talking about here this afternoon. And Workforce is really around the planning aspect, providing your mobile users with the ability to see what their jobs are throughout the day and what they're tackling. We've got several key industries that we look at targeting. These are by no means the only industries that we look at. We're seeing various other areas where our field apps that, from our perspective, are a little non-traditional, but still really exciting for us to see growth in, such as the commercial space, where people are really gravitating to using our field operations and the apps that we develop. And then on the right-hand side is sort of an overview of all of the different apps that we have, with a focus highlighting on Workforce, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. Really we get a lot of questions about, why did you build this new app called Workforce, and what really was the genesis of it? It is a very different app for us, for both Esri and us on the field operations team, and that to some extent it's not about the map, and the map isn't centric. If you kind of go in the Wayback Machine to around 2013, 2014, our product manager at the time, Jeff Shaner, was visiting various client sites, talking to them of their use of our other field apps. And he really heard, a common theme and request that was coming in, which is collector specifically is very useful and helpful for collecting data in the field, performing inspections in the field, gathering information about your assets. But one of the requests he kept hearing was, it's difficult to communicate with workers in the field. As plans change throughout the day, it's sometimes difficult to get a hold of them, let them know that we need them to reprioritize their work, or some new work has come in and they need to shift their focus and go in a different direction. The other piece that he heard was that it's difficult to actually track the workers' progress. So where are they throughout their day in terms of their to-do list for that day? And we really took those different use cases and requirements, went and met with various users such as yourselves, and looked at how they're doing workforce management today for their field staff. And really a common theme that we saw was that everybody who does mobile field management starts off with a stack of work. And this is like a stack of papers that you might have, or it's in a manila envelope or a big binder or a folder that your workers are given to it the day. And there could be various ways that a worker gets those stack of papers or reports that they head out to them and take into the field. But the common theme was that there's some sort of ordering of work that needs to be done, and there's information about that work that needs to be done in the field. The other piece that we heard was that there's generally at least one person, maybe a few people in the organization, depending on the size of the project that you're working on, that are responsible for either creating those work assignments or determining who should do that work. So in terms of coordinating that work in the field. I'd like you to kind of think those two use cases and keep them in mind as we talk about Workforce and you see the demos that James is going to do. And hopefully you can see how we took those use cases and some of those common themes and applied them to the solution that we've provided. Before we get going, one really important piece to kind of touch on is the different user types that we have within ArcGIS. You heard about this in the plenary on Monday from Jack, and really the key comment he made was that this was an ask and a requirement that was coming from you and came to us, as in you needed more flexibility, a better way to manage your named users in your organization, and specifically for your field workers. And that's really something that we heard on the field operations team. And to really show just how important that is within the overall ArcGIS platform, there's a specific named user for the field worker who is provided with the field apps bundle to make it available to actually use those apps and take them out into the field. So you can see that, it's not just about the person who's viewing the data or editing it, or the GIS professional who's creating that data. This really speaks to just how key and central the field worker workflow is within the overall platform, that it's got its own specific named user type with capabilities that are geared towards using our different field apps. So just really quickly on Workforce for ArcGIS, how many people in the room are using Workforce or have taken it for a spin and test drive? Raise them high. No, I didn't say put them down, keep them up. It's getting late in the conference already, I can't count that fast. So most of the room hasn't used it yet. So really just a really quick introduction to what Workforce is. And I talked about this previously, right? That Jeff had gone out, talked to various customers who are using our field apps, heard this requirement, this ask to plan and coordinate work, to provide the way for people in the back office to communicate with mobile workers to make adjustments throughout the day for their work that they had to take with them out in the field, and the list of work that they wanted to do. We also wanted to improve the communication between those mobile users who were out in the field and the users in the back office, so that the people in the back office could see the mobile users working through their list throughout the day. And that back and forth communication is really fundamental and key to what Workforce is. The other really big piece that we wanted to improve for Workforce was improving the operational awareness, like this second bullet says. We went to visit one client site who, when we first started talking to them, they were doing valve exercising as their fieldwork project that we focused on a ride-along. And at first glance when we were working with them, we didn't think there was really a fit for Workforce when we were working on, because they did the valve exercising. They actually have an attribute on their valves which indicates whether it was exercised during that field season or not. So they were able to author an operations dashboard pointing to that layer with a really nice widget that would show the number of valves being exercised throughout the year. So we kind of thought, well, their operational awareness is actually really high. They know where they are with all that work. They know what's left to be done. They can see that progress throughout the year. But the piece that they were missing was who's doing which valves to exercise, right? And once we sat down and talked to them and talked to the workers, what we found out was that for a good percentage of the time, those workers were actually revisiting valves that either they've already exercised or someone else who was doing it was exercising. So actually allowing the workers to also have an increased window into the operational awareness, the awareness of how that operation is proceeding throughout the field season, was also really important. So it's not always about people in the back office having that operational view. The last piece was the ability to create and manage field work. And for people on the team, the thing that we always really talk about Workforce and sort of the phrase that we hang our hat on is we needed to make it better than paper. There's all sorts of flexibilities that you get with paper in terms of being able to apply any types of information to it and writing it, but there's all sorts of areas where paper just falls down, right? So losing those sheets of paper, they might get wet. So we wanted to take the flexibility that mobile users and people in the back office had with printing out those service requests and work orders in paper and transition that into digital, but also keep that flexibility for them. And you'll see that a little bit as we go throughout the demo. So in a nutshell, this is Workforce for ArcGIS and sort of why we built it and the different scenarios around which you might use it. But instead of me going over a bunch more slides, I'm going to pass it over to James, who's going to take you through the first several demos highlighting workforce.
So, hi, as Craig mentioned, I'm James. I've seen a few of you at the booth earlier, so that's great. I'm glad you guys came. Craig thought it would be a good idea for me to get over my severe public speaking fear by doing this here right now. So if I go too fast, or yell at me to slow down. So as you can see, maybe, in the mobile application, I'm a worker out in the field. I've logged in with my named user, and the first thing I see is my to-do list. You can rank it by priorities. You can filter by what's due date, priority, and it'll show you, how far away you are from that. You'll also see in this bottom right my working status. So this will tie back. Also, working on break and not working also ties back to the location tracking service that we'll get to in a little bit later in the demo. So I select one of my assignments that I want to work on. It brings me to a detail view, which will show a map, as well as the detail on that assignment. I can start the assignment. It'll register on the map. It'll also register back on the home app that assignment has been started. And say I need to, I don't know how to get there. I can navigate to that assignment through our app integrations by selecting that overflow menu and then hitting Navigator. It'll automatically bring me in, sign me in, because it knows I get a route error because that's trying to bring me to the Adriatic Sea. But that is how it works. So say again, so I've navigated to my assignment, and now I want to collect something at that assignment. Same thing, it's going to open up that app, sign me right in, and then bring me right to that layer, that map that I've pre-associated with this project or assignment type, depending on how we've set it up. And then you can see it also is passed in. Is it registering my touches? You can see it's passed in the address, which is something we've configured on the back end, which I'll get to a little bit later in the demo as well. Back to workforce, one last time, same thing for exploring. Maybe. Try it one more time. All right. I don't think I'm signed in. Anyway, it will open Explorer and work just the way it did with Collector and Navigator. You can also see there is a field to add notes. You can jot down something, say if you get to an assignment and something's not right, or just the work you performed at that assignment. And you can also add attachments, say a picture of the work that you did, or if you were to decline an assignment, maybe they sent you there to do something that's not actually doesn't need to get done. You can take a photo of that and say, the dispatcher will see that on the assignment back in the home office, and they can follow up from there. So once I'm done, I finish my assignment. It'll tell me it's done, and then it just brings me right back to the to-do list. So really, we try to keep the app as clean and simple as possible, because the worker in the field has a lot to do already. And we just want to show you what is my work, where is my work, and what stage of the process is that work in. And that is pretty much it.
All right. Thanks, James. Yeah, so just a couple things I kind of want to highlight on the mobile app that James showed there. What was the first thing that you noticed when he pulled the mobile app up? What did you see? Pardon me? Track list? Checklist. A checklist. Thank you. That's great. This is going to be a long 60 minutes, folks, because I'm going to ask lots of questions. So checklist was a good example, right? So yeah, the list that's there. So really with the mobile app, the thing that we heard, remember I talked about those stacks of papers, right? If you've headed out into the field with any of your mobile workers, you might also see that they actually take some of those and write on a separate piece of paper their to-do list for the day, which ones they're going to go through to kind of keep that list going. So the checklist, the to-do list that they have to do that day is a really key piece for the mobile user. And because we're showing it on the phone, we wanted to make that front and center for them. So I mentioned before, it's a bit of a different product for us because the first thing we're showing you isn't a map, right? And we're a mapping company. So it was a really big difference and a change for us. And what drove that home was going out with those workers in the field and seeing them work off a list. So we wanted to make the list at the forefront and right in front of them, so they had a very comfortable view that they also see with paper. If we were to show this on tablets, like you see in the screen here in the background, you would actually see the map and the list at the same time. But because we're on this smaller screen on the phone, we're just showing a list, and like James showed, you could go back to the map. So just like you've got that list of work, what we did is we took a look at all those different service requests, those work orders, those paper pieces that were printed up, and we grabbed examples from all the different users that we went to. We put them down at the table back at the office, and we looked at similarities between them. And what we display here are a few things that they all showed in common. So they all had details about the assigned work. Now, obviously, they're going to have things like who should do the work and a service request or a work order number, but they've got the location of what that needs to be, and that could be an address, it could be a lat long, it could be a description. They've also got varying details like James showed, so information about what needs to be done at that particular location. That details area that James showed is a very large text field. It's 4,000 characters in size, so you can drop lots of descriptive information in it. If there's other information that you want to attach to give to your workers, maybe you're not just printing out the service request, but you're also printing out other PDFs or photos and attaching it to it. Maybe you're doing call before you dig, right? Or USA 1 calls to locate where the utilities are going up to a house before they do construction. You might want to print out the plan view of the parcel in the house and include that in the service request. You can do that same thing in Workforce by attaching PDFs or other photos so that the workers have it on their device. And just like out in the field, that work that the worker is going through is going to go through various stages. James showed it initially when he opened up the assignment. He showed that it was assigned to him, and then he clicked Start. You saw the color change to green, which indicated that he had started that work. And like he mentioned, that's going to get written up into the cloud, into my organization, and I can actually track and see that work as he's going through it. Like he mentioned, I can also go and add and edit notes. And then myself, as the worker in the field, I could attach photos or videos to it to document my work. And really, those different notes and the attaching of photos and videos, those are two really important things I just want to touch on really quickly. The ability to add and edit notes is something that's been there since the beginning of Workforce, because when we put all these service request papers that we took from all the different site visits down and looked at them, one of the things that they all shared in common was that they had a big box on the paper which just said, write whatever you want for the worker. Now, it could have been called comments or notes or info from the field. Essentially, it was just a place for the worker to write anything that they had to document there, right? There's a really angry dog at this house, I can't actually get to this work, or the location of the asset isn't described. Essentially, whatever they want, and that's what the notes field is for. So that was a common theme that we saw. The ability to attach photos and videos wasn't there at the beginning, and that was something that we heard from you. You came to us and said, the ability to attach information in all your other apps, such as Collector, is not enough. We need photos and videos to be able to document the work, to show proof that something was done. Roughage was collected. That call before you dig is a great example because they're not actually editing any asset information. They're not changing anything on the parcel or the building. They're dropping some flags, they're putting some paint on the ground. That photo is the proof that they did that work. So attaching it to that assignment means that it follows it through. Lastly, James showed that Workforce does not work just on its own as an isolated single app. All of our field apps are built to work together. And really, as the people who configure these projects about what the workers need to do in the field, you have control over which of our apps you want to configure with Workforce. So you could be doing something like a call before you dig or a locator project where actually Workforce gives you everything you need. Or you might be doing something like James was showing with the water meter inspection, where you actually need to call out to Collector, and you want to be able to create new features in Collector and then come back to Workforce. So all those flows of being able to pick the apps a la carte and build them up into your own workflow are possible in there. And then lastly, James demonstrated broadcasting your working status, so your workers are able to indicate when they're working or also when they're on break and not working. And this is a really important point to mention because Workforce allows you to see the location of your workers as they go throughout their day. And you'll see this a little bit in the dispatching demo when James shows them on the map. But it's only doing that when their status is set to working. When the worker sets it to on break or not working, we no longer update their location into the service for you to see it. We indicate to you that their status is on break or not working, but we don't update their location anymore. So yeah, we talked about this a little bit, the different ways that Workforce can integrate with our other apps. And this is available in our documentation in terms of the different patterns that we see with our different apps. We talked a little bit about really the most common one that we see in use today, which is Workforce calling out to either Collector or even Survey123 if you're doing a form-based workflow. But at the top, like James was showing, we've also got the ability to navigate to assignments to allow users to see where they're going. And then also use Explorer. Maybe you don't need Collector to actually create and update new features in the field. You want people to be able to use markup to do really lightweight and sort of heads-up markup of maps digitally. You can integrate Explorer in with Workforce to allow you to do that. One of the other really key aspects of Workforce is the idea of assignments. We love to give new terms to things at Esri, and it actually really helps us build the software and gives us a common language to speak to one another about. It also gives us a sort of a general term to handle lots of other scenarios and terms that are out there. Whether you call these, work assignments, service requests, job numbers, work orders, whatever you might call it, it's essentially an item of work that needs to be done. It's got several properties associated with it that you see up here, such as the status of it, what state is that work in, when that work might be due, what its priority is, and etc. When we went and visited various customer sites, one of the things that we heard was that, there's various different states that the work can be in. And one of the things that we heard was that there's some common themes between these states, and there's some differences from site to site. And what we tried to do was pick the best common denominator that allowed us to target the largest amount of use cases for this. With Workforce, it was a bit of a different project from our perspective. We've done other mobile work management systems or logistic products in the past, and they've tried to, be all things to all people. With Workforce, we looked at it a little bit differently and tried to say, well, let's actually look at what the common themes are across these different mobile field workforce workflows and actually pick the commonalities between it. So instead of trying to satisfy every use case, let's try to get to the 80% one so that we can build a really robust solution that can scale and work for lots of customers. And then ideally, we have users who can come in and say, yeah, I see what you're doing here, and I see that you've got a well-defined data model, well-defined flow, how to manage work, and that's going to work for me. And for some customers, for some of you in this room, actually, your answer might be no, it's not going to work for me. Because you actually might have a very well-defined set of states, and it's more than the 6 that I have here. And if you decide that 8 states is key and critical to your workflow, then we'd love to know what that is and what we need to do to make it work. But it might be that Workforce isn't for you at this time, and one of our partner solutions is. And that's a perfectly, valid viewpoint, because in the end, you have to satisfy your own users within your company for that flow. So that's a little bit about our rationale about why we built Workforce the way we did with this predefined flow and set of status values. For those of you who are actually using either our Python API or other ways to get at this assignment data outside of Workforce, we have date timestamps that are applied every time the state changes for that assignment. So you can see when someone actually started work. Maybe you've got a particular worker who you suspect doesn't spend the amount of time doing the work that they should. You can actually see if the time that they spend between when they start an assignment and complete it is more than 2 seconds. And it happens quite often. Because that date timestamp is there, you're able to see just how quick they're firing through that workflow because we're recording that information with the assignment. Okay, so enough about the mobile app and kind of summing stuff up. I'm going to pass it back to James, who's going to take you through the dispatcher workflow. I'm going to pass it back to James to take it. There we go. Just had to ask it nicely.
Thought I was off the hook. I've been demonstrating this down at the booth for those that might look familiar. What we see here is similar to the mobile app, but just an expanded view. On the left, I have my the assignments that are out there. On the right, I have my map. And what the work is, where that work is. Right now, this data is unfiltered. We're showing, paginating by 50. You can see this is a lot of assignments, and this is where the ability to sort really comes in handy. You can sort by the status, highest priority, newest, due date, and assignment type. Some of you were speaking to me earlier and saying, I have, it's a ton of work coming in every day. Stuff comes to the top. How do I sort it better, or what can I do for that? And prioritizing things as critical or high, or just setting a custom date of show me today, show me what's due today, what's newest. You can do that through here. So you can see on the map, we have the assignments that have been laid out onto the map, and these are currently shown in gray as unassigned. You see green, which have been assigned. And then when we click on one of those features, we see it automatically slides over to the details on that assignment. And you'll see I can have an assignment right here, find my workers who are working and logged in. And then you'll see also someone who's not working, because maybe even though they're not online, it might not be a critical issue, or maybe they're the only one that knows how to do that job. So I can still assign to someone even though they're not currently working. So we can go ahead and assign to someone who is working. Show it there. You can see it's now shown as assigned. And then I can add my attachments here as well if that comes in from maybe like a 311, a customer has said there's a fire hydrant leaking somewhere. This is a meter exchange, so maybe they smell gas or something. They can send a photo that the customer attached in that 311 service. From here, I can go in and actually edit this assignment manually. If the assignment type was put in wrong, I'll see all of my available assignment types here. Maybe the location isn't quite right. I can edit that as well. Again, with the assignee, maybe I picked the wrong assignee or there wasn't one. And then I can set a priority or a due date if we find out that this is a much bigger issue than we initially thought. You can set a priority up to critical. Critical actually, when you critically assign a task to a worker, it'll actually ping their device and force them to acknowledge that. And we'll see that on the, not force them to acknowledge it, but it'll show up on their phone and they have to acknowledge that before they can move on, because, and you can see that if it's been acknowledged or not, knowing that they've been assigned that critical work. You see the description passed in here. And then the ID field. So this we added. A lot of you have told us that you have a different system, say like a SAP or something else that has maybe a ticket number, a work order ID. So we've added this ID field so that you can tie these back to that other system, and then you can relate those somehow, do a join, because this all writes back to the assignments feature service in your organization. So if we go back out, I can also, because this is a pretty busy map, I can cancel it from here if I want, or I can highlight it just to stand out, because with the 5,000 assignments we have here, sometimes you want to see that flash. So the other thing you may have noticed about this tab is that there's a worker section. So in this worker section, it's going to tell you who's currently online, who's currently working, and who's not working. And it'll tell you when they were online, when they were last active, and their current workload. So we like this feature because maybe utility service 3 is closer to this assignment here, but because they already have 31 issues assigned to them, 2 might be the better choice. And again, I could still assign someone who's offline and find where their last known location is. So if I ping Craig, we see he's sitting next to me, and there aren't any assignments around him here. So now I can choose to make those assignments by going back to the assignment tab. And you could pull from a feature layer and make an assignment directly from there, but we're just going to manually drop some points on the map. And you've seen Craig doesn't want to do that work, so he just went on break. But I'm going to assign him that work anyway. Do a gas meter change. So,
I'm not working anymore, man. I'm not taking them.
And as I mentioned before, that's Craig's. That we put that entirely on the worker, so they control. Now he's just gone offline. He's hiding. And you'll see too, there is a heartbeat on this web app. So every 10 seconds, the mobile app calls out and says, what are my assignments? Where are my workers? And now Craig's back online because I guilted him into doing it. If you didn't notice it from before, when I click on the map, it actually is geocoding the address from the geocoder that's assigned, set up in your organization. So I can assign to Craig, maybe. And then let's give it a priority of high, give it a due date of today. Say he's overdue. Tell them to stop slacking. So I could add an attachment here as well, like I mentioned, for all these issues. It's going to do a bulk create of all these with this assignment type, all these locations here. And then we'll see these pins change to features that have now been written to that assignment service, that assignment feature layer. And now we'll see them on the map. So Craig may be moving through one now. So I can actually sort by. So we can see that Craig is actually working on those now. He's taken some on, and this one's actually been completed. And I can go through and I can actually take one.
I'm done my work, man.
He's done his work.
It's all completed.
You rock. Thank you. So I can take an assignment and I can reassign it from this list as well. Really, something we learned as well is we tried to put the assign button everywhere because people, usually it's work. Who is it? Who needs it? Just try to avoid as few clicks as possible to get that work assigned to someone. But we can also cancel that work from here to say that inspection didn't actually need to happen. If you make that mistake, you can't undo it. But just acknowledge that. That's all set. And we'll go through, I mentioned pulling from features and how this is set up. We'll come to that in the next demo, and I'll get a little bit deeper into that.
All right. Thanks, dude. Okay, so let me just James did a great job there covering everything. I actually don't have a whole lot to cover on here because he went over most of it. But just to kind of sum it up, this is the second role that we think about with workforce, right? There's the mobile users out in the field that we talked about in the first part of the presentation. The second is the dispatcher, the person in that central office. Now, you might use different terms for them, right? They might be a supervisor, they might be a field crew chief, you might be a smaller operation. And in some cases, if you're a GIS admin, you actually might be doing the dispatching in some cases. And really the role of that dispatcher is like James showed, it's to create, prioritize, and to get that work into mobile workers' hands. James really showed sort of the two main types of work that you have to tackle with field work. There's the work that you know about and the work you don't know about. So the planned and unplanned work. And those assignments that were all created for James ahead of time that you saw on the map were great examples of planned assignments. Someone running this project made a decision that all of those meters had to be inspected or changed out or looked at. Now, however someone in the organization made that decision, really for workforce, for us it's a bit of we don't know, and it actually really doesn't matter to us all that much. You have processes in place that indicate when those inspections or those changes should occur. Maybe they're due to the lifetime of the assets and they're coming due, or they could be due to other circumstances as well. The point is that someone actually either because they willfully decided it or because you have an SOP or a set of rules, decided that work needs to be done on those. And that's a great example of planned work. The other example that James showed, which is unplanned work, is where he created, I guess there's tons of gas meters throughout the convention center, and I got to go look at them, where he just kind of dropped them down there. Now that was a really short and quick example of it, just to demonstrate the capability, but hopefully you can see how practical that can be in your own case, where maybe you're getting calls coming in from a 311 system, and they're coming to your dispatcher from some other way, and they just need to react throughout the day and get that work into the system. And then optionally, like James showed, assign it to a worker so they can go and take care of it. One really common example that I actually thought it was just my dad, but evidently there's people like my dad in every city who constantly call their counselor about the tree in front of their house that bugs them and they want it taken down. This is a real example from a customer we talked to. And the Parks Department said, eventually our city councilor just called and said, can you just take that tree out today, please? Because I can't deal with this person talking anymore, or can you trim it? Whatever the example might be in that case, right? I mean, that's a great example of unplanned work that you wouldn't think about, but there's lots of cases where someone contacts you in the organization for whatever reason and says, can you just take care of this, please? I just need it done today, right? Maybe it's because you've got an angry old man, like my father, bugging the counselor to have it taken care of, or maybe there's more practical or time-sensitive scenarios where it comes up. But really good examples of both that planned and unplanned work that might occur. James did a really nice example talking about all the different ways that you can create the assignments. So he showed geocoding those assignments and doing that reverse geocode, creating on the map. You can also create assignments from features. So if we had features in that map, you could click on that feature, that asset, and then create an assignment from it. You can also create them automatically or by scripting on the back end through the workforce module in the ArcGIS Python API. You also have the ability to call an audible or change who has that work assigned to them, or reassign that work or cancel it throughout the day, both individually and in bulk. And then James talked about all the different things that you can do in Workforce in terms of filtering, sorting the assignments, viewing the location of your different workers, and then searching the map is also a capability that's there. But you can see there's a lot of similarities between both the mobile app and the web app in terms of they're presenting a list of the work that needs to be done. We didn't do that just because we had a nice to-do list in the mobile app and thought it would be useful in the web app. When we went to one site in particular, we met a woman by the name of Carrie who was responsible for doing the dispatching for this particular customer. And the way that Carrie worked is that she had an Excel spreadsheet in front of her. And actually that Excel spreadsheet is the demo that James just showed. So over 5,000 assignments that they would go through over the course of 6 to 8 months. And it would take them 6 to 8 months to go through all that because she just had a big Excel spreadsheet that she was just going through, figuring out work. So we sat down with her and talked about what she would really like, and a map and several different pieces that eventually became Workforce worked into it. But something that really resonated with us was that seeing the work in a list was comforting. She understood the list. Sorting it was very familiar. Scrolling through it was familiar. So we wanted to keep that list idea and build it into the dispatcher app to help dispatchers get comfortable with that list idea. So we're trying to make it comfortable for people who have existing processes, existing procedures on how to work with this, and move it into digital and be able to get up and running really quickly and be familiar with how it's done. Because really, it's just mirroring in a web app how they work today, whether it's in a spreadsheet or in paper. All right, so I'm going to pass it back to James, who's going to go through a demo for administering.
Yeah, so we started with the mobile demo, which was the worker in the field doing the work. Then we moved to the dispatcher, which was creating and assigning assignments inside of a project. Now I'm going to show you the project owner and the kind of the administrative side of how we got to those other two areas. So I'm logged in as my admin, and I'll see this create project button here. Here you'll see a list of all my other projects that I have currently active. That I either own, I am a dispatcher, or I'm a worker assigned to. A dispatcher or an owner, sorry. So I'll create a new project, demo for UC. I can give it a summary of what I want, just something goes in here. and then I create the project. So what it's doing now is creating 2 web maps, 4 feature services, a dispatcher service, a worker service, an assignments service, and then the location tracking service. And we'll get into kind of each one of those as we move through. Where it's going to land me once it finishes is on the configuration page. And this is where everything that you can do inside the app comes from. So I have my assignment types. Every single assignment has to have at least one assignment, or every project has to have at least one assignment type in order to make assignments. Depending on how you've set up your organization, some people have one project only for their entire municipality that handles police and fire and yard crews. So the granularity of the assignment type is really important, because you definitely don't want to send a firefighter to mow a lawn, and you definitely don't want to send someone mowing a lawn to a domestic disturbance. So getting specific in here on what you're trying to do, say a fire call, lawn mowing, lawn moving. And something might be a little more generic between the two, so maybe you need fire and police to that specific. So you see they're added here. The next tab is for users. So this is where you're going to see all of your named users in your organization. And you can see this organization is quite large. You can go in and add them manually, but we also added add workers from file, because there are some organizations out there that have 1,000 people in their project. So if I select Aaron, the next thing you need to select is a project role. So there's only 2 roles. You're either a dispatcher or a mobile worker. So we'll make Aaron a dispatcher and add. And then if we add Aaron again, you'll see that he's automatically assigned the mobile worker because he's in that list as a dispatcher. Add him there, and then just to show the modal. So for importing into a CSV file, we also allow you to download a template for that CSV file, and you can pre-populate with existing workers, which is a really nice feature, because if you've already set up this project, say you already have 20 or 30 people in there, and you want to download that, it'll append those into that file for you if you want to move to a different project, if you instead of having to lose all that work and redo it, because it can get a little tedious if you're manually adding workers that way. Next is the Advanced tab. So this is where our app integrations that I showed in the first demo are going to be added. So you can see Navigator by default is added as an app integration. That'll always be shown to the mobile worker when they're in the field. So for collector, first thing I do is just select a map. I'll go with Maine breweries, because I'm from Maine and we have a lot of great beer. The next thing you can do, so you can see it's either the entire project will, any assignment created for this project will see that call in the mobile app to open collector, or we got a lot of feedback saying that people want to do assignment type specific, because again, a map for one type of work might be completely irrelevant to a different type of work, so don't even bother showing it there, because it could just make it more confusing. And then here we have the fields that we're going to pass from workforce into collector. So we have a global ID, that ID, and the location. And then we don't have any layers, this one, no layers found from there for right now, but by default they're going to be blank, so I can leave them blank. Hit done, and now I've successfully integrated collector with workforce. It's the same for Explorer, same for Survey. Pull up your list of what you want to add, how you want to associate it with the application between workforce and one of the other field apps. And now we're all set to open our project. But before we do that, you'll see what we've configured are 3 users here. We have 0 assignments, and then the maps here and the embedded map viewers. So what I mentioned in the dispatcher demo, this map here is really where, if you have a layer that has features on it that you want to create assignments from, if those of you who have seen from the booth, we've been doing a lot with fire hydrants. So I can find this fire hydrant layer here, add it to my map, it'll show me all the fire hydrants for San Diego. So if I save that and then open the project, it'll bring me right to that map. The worker map, typically we don't pull in those features because the user is working on such a small screen. It clutters up the map, and again, our goal is to show them what they need to do and how to do it and not distract them with other things. But you can, it's the exact same embedded web viewer as it is for the dispatcher view. It just works on the mobile map. So when I open the project, I'll see the extent with my features there. And if I click on those features, I can see how many features are in that area that I clicked. I can select them all or select individually, and then create assignments right from those features, exactly like I did before manually by clicking on the map itself. And I can also lasso a large area. It'll pull up all of the information, all of those features that are in that area that I lassoed. And again, I can select them all to create an assignment from them, or I can pick them out and grab it from there. So last thing I want to show is just what is created when I created that workforce project. So you'll see the two maps, as I mentioned, the worker and dispatcher map, and then the location, dispatcher, and workers, as well as the assignments feature layer. So since I made some changes to that assignments feature layer, you'll see it up on top. I think, yeah, that's all I have for that.
All right, thanks, dude. So let me just kind of wrap it up a little bit, and then I think we've got a few minutes at the end for questions. So just really kind of covering what James did there. You know, most of you in the room, you know, are going to be people who are, you know, responsible for managing the web maps and the services within your organization. You might call yourself a GIS admin, a GIS analyst, but you manage it from that perspective. You know, one of the things that we did in this project when we looked at it was we really wanted to make it easy to get up and running with Workforce. And hopefully also, you know, over the course of this presentation, you've seen that we're kind of talking about it differently. We're talking about the mobile worker first, then the dispatcher, and we left all the GIS geeky cool stuff, I think anyway, to the end, right? Normally, we do the opposite, and we talk about the GIS geeky cool stuff at the beginning, and then we leave the rest of it for the end. But we really want to turn it on its head when we think about Workforce, because it's more about the mobile worker and the dispatcher, and really, you know, we just want to get you up and running quickly. So when James created that Workforce project, and it created those 7 things and a folder and a group, you know, how long do you think it would take you to create all that manually? 30 minutes, maybe? An hour, right? Well, I've created more than anybody, which is not a record that's awesome. But trust me, it takes you at least 30 minutes, and you're going to make a mistake half the time, right? So if I'm making a mistake half the time, and I've created more than anybody, how successful do you think you would be if the first step with Workforce we said was, okay, so go create 4 feature services, and then create 2 web maps, and then you got to create a group and a folder, and make sure you don't make a mistake halfway through. That's why we built this ability to just drop it all in, make it available to you. Because creating these services and web maps isn't your job. It's a thing you have to do, a task you have to perform to get this information into the hands of the users in your organization so they can be successful. And they can go and gather this information. And that frees you up to do other things, right? So we really wanted to make that simple and straightforward to do. And hopefully you saw that, you know, in the demo that James was showing. You know, we're not really giving you the ability to dive into things. By all means, you could, right? Dig into those and see what's in those different items. You know, but for the most part, we see a lot of people just staying up in the web app and handling it from that perspective. A couple other things that we look at, you know, in terms of Workforce. One thing that we kind of haven't talked about yet is that we don't do anything special with Workforce assignments when we create them. You could go and grab that layer that James just created, or the one with the meters in it, and you could just go and add it to a web map and look at it. There's nothing special about it. We're not storing anything in a hidden field or hiding stuff from you. So if you create features in that feature service, and you create them the way that we document, they'll just work in Workforce. They'll show up in the Dispatcher web app. They'll show up in the mobile app, right? All the Dispatcher app is doing is it's streamlining that workflow for your dispatchers, making it easy for them to get up and running. So along that same thread, these services are available for use in our other apps like Collector and Survey123. Now, why might you, include these services in those other apps? Well, you might be using them for display. You might have other people who are using Collector who actually want to see the status of assignments, when they're out in the field. But one of the other reasons we hear about it is that one workflow that we actually didn't anticipate being so requested was the ability for mobile workers, for specific mobile workers, to create new assignments in the field. We've talked about the back office between field workflow and the communication between the two. How many people have mobile workers in their organization who should be able to create new work in the field? Yeah, see, that's one that didn't come out in our initial research, and that's a fail on our research team. I don't know. Anyway, it didn't. That was Jeff Shaner who was in charge of that. I see several people know Jeff Shaner. Awesome. Yeah. But that's one that we've heard more and more about. So that is absolutely in our backlog to tackle. But in the meantime, we do have a way that you can approach this using specifically Collector. You could use Survey123 for it as well, but you use Collector to do this. Now, I'm not going to keep asking you to raise your hand, but commonly what we hear for people who come to us and ask for this ability for the users in the field to create work assignments is that they don't want everybody in the field creating work assignments. It's specific people who have the privilege or the permission to do that for whatever reason, right? So that's a really key thing to keep in mind. It is something that we're looking at tackling. I'll talk about that on the next slide a little bit. We didn't have time to go into, automating how everything works in Workforce and using Python to do it. But just really quickly, there's a Workforce module in the Python API. We've got a screenshot of our repo here on GitHub. The name of the repo is workforce-scripts. You can also get to it from our documentation page on the schema. And actually, James will be doing a demo theater with another member of our team, Aaron, tomorrow at 10 o'clock. In Demo Theater 12. So if you even have a middling interest in Python and automating how to tie into Workforce, please attend that session. I promise James will be much more animated tomorrow than he was today.
Jazz.
Yeah. Early night tonight. Yes. I see several people are familiar with early nights at the UC. All right. So here's our current status of Workforce. Several changes that we've made to it lately. We've recently done, in the last release, several administration improvements, some of which we were able to show here. And then also, really, for the big one for us was that ability to attach photos to the mobile app. But what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes on sort of what's coming next for Workforce. No pictures, please, no pictures for road ahead slides. It's totally subject to change. It might have changed while I was talking. No, I mean, these plans are what we're working on next is pretty well defined. It's the timelines that might change a little bit. So for us, we actually had to make a decision when we first did Workforce, which was the offline capabilities in the platform weren't quite there for us. There were several updates and changes that we needed. And we had to make the decision of, should we wait and not release Workforce and wait for those changes to come to us? Or should we release Workforce as a connected app? Does anyone not know what I mean about Workforce being a connected app versus an offline app? Awesome, that's wicked, yeah. So right now, Workforce does not work offline, right? So if you lose a connection, you won't be able to maintain those edits locally and keep, making changes and then have it sync them up. That is our next big project that we're tackling for Workforce. Right now, that's currently targeted for the end of the year to do that. If you're interested in being involved in it and being a beta partner and actually using the app in either a tech preview capacity or in beta, please let us know at the booth. You can also contact us at our alias, which is Workforce, the number 4, ArcGIS at Esri.com. You can get to that both through the mobile app and the web app as well to contact us. I'm on that alias, and if you're interested in being it, just let us know. We'll gladly add you to the list to notify you when that's available so that we can dig into it. After we do that, the next big item that we want to tackle is what I was just discussing, which is the ability to see the unassigned work in the field and then optionally create it as well. There's sort of two facets to this. You know, we hear that the ability to create work assignments in the field is really important, but almost more important is the ability for certain workers to be able to grab work throughout the day. Right? How many people have mobile workers who should be able to self-assign or pick up their own work as they go throughout the day, right? Yeah, we hear that one quite a bit. And it usually comes up when it's, you know, the shift ends at 5 o'clock and it's around 4. They've got an hour left to go. They'd like to knock off some more stuff and see what's around them. So that's really the next big ticket that we're looking at for it. The other item is the ability to expand the assignment schema. I talked about that we have a predefined schema for workforce with a set number of fields. What we've heard is that works well for you, but there's generally like 1 or 2 more fields that you need, and that field is either specific to the dispatcher or the worker. Sometimes it's both, but it's something that you need to provide to them. We're looking at allowing you to expose those fields in both the web app and the mobile app. You can add those fields to the assignments feature layer today, but they will not appear in the web app and the mobile app. So we're looking at giving you an ability to allow those fields to appear for your dispatchers and workers. And then lastly, just continuing to improve app integration and add more capabilities to it and move it forward. So please share your feedback in the app about this session. If you loved it, it really helps us to know that we've hit the mark on it. You know, if you don't like it and you want to give us a thumbs down, my name is Jeff Shaner, and this is Doug Morgenthaler to my left. So thank you very much for taking the time, and we got a few minutes left, so we'll take any questions from anybody in the audience. Yes, and then I'll go over here next.
Is there an ability to automate the workflow? Like if you generate one kind of assignment, it automatically needs to go to this person and then this person can do that?
Yeah, so the question...
Go back to the dispatcher each time and have it reassigned.
Is that it? Okay. I thought you were done in the first part, and then you had a second to follow on to it. Yeah. So the question was, is there a way to automate the workflow so that when an assignment's created, it's automatically assigned to a specific worker or a worker? And then there was a second part about the dispatcher.
Not necessarily a specific worker, but
Okay.
let's say you have, every time you do a culvert fix, someone else needs to go out and inspect it.
Ah, okay.
Someone else needs to go do some other.
So chained assignments, right? Once one assignment is whatever, created, completed, that would trigger another assignment to get created. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. There's a couple, the short answer is no. I'll now go with the longer answer, which is no, but. If you're interested in delving into scripting to do that, that is a workflow that we've seen several customers be successful with. We do have it in our backlog to look at how that could work. That would be a big project for us, so I'll be honest. It's not on our near-term roadmap for it. But from the scripting side, you could do that by actually having a script with that logic in it as you just described. If it's a culvert that's repaired, once that particular assignment is completed, then spin off another assignment automatically to be created. The way that you would do that is through that Python API module I was talking about, and you would set that up as an observer script, essentially just a batch file that would run every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, look for new assignments that are completed of a particular type, and then fire off that logic that you need to do. A couple years ago when we first released the GitHub scripts for Workforce, that would have been a big lift for you, unless you had some experience in Python. But with the new Workforce module in the API, and also Jupyter Notebooks, it's a lot easier now, and the lift isn't as high. We do know it's not as easy as if we built it into the app, but it's a little easier to do it. The other piece I would add about that is that's actually a line that we drew in the app's roadmap originally, the product's roadmap. But the difference between what we would deliver as a COTS solution and what our business partners could add as a value add. Because we felt with something like that, in talking to various customers, and this might not be your situation, once you move into that sort of chained workflow, there's always other things that come with that in terms of requests. And at the time, we felt business partners could meet that need a little bit better. That is something that we reevaluate all the time. So I'd encourage you to look at the Python API. I'd also suggest that's a great one to get on the ideas website, right? If it isn't already there. So we can really gauge the feedback for other people. Because then that really gives me the information I need to go to the team and our product owners to say, look, we're getting a huge request for this. We need to commit the time to actually dig into it. Yeah. Yes, sir. Apple notifications. So the way that Workforce works right now in terms of notifications is they're really all on-device notifications. So the app actually has to be running in order to get any of those. We are looking at moving to more operating system notification style. For us, that's really tied with picking up push notifications as a true way of having the app work. Right now, the way that Workforce automates is it works on a polling mechanism. So every 60 seconds or on regular intervals, it goes and asks the different services, hey, has anything changed? Hey, has anything changed, right? I mean, that works all right. You know, it has an impact on the battery, and we're not, you know, super happy about that. So we actually do have an R&D project to look at moving to push notifications in the platform, and then that would really allow us to then move to true device-specific notifications, both for iOS and Android. So that is something that we're looking at right now. Actually, the R&D project that we're doing with those notifications is centered around Tracker for ArcGIS, because the same team that builds Workforce builds Tracker. So we're kind of looking at how it could work for Tracker and then moving that into Workforce. Yeah. Yes?
Can the field worker use the field app to request something from the dispatcher, like additional resources or another field worker?
So the question was, because, you know, can the worker use the mobile app to request additional resources from the dispatcher? Not directly, no. There's a couple ways they could do that, though. One of the things we didn't show, I didn't show it yesterday either, was you can find other workers in the mobile app. So you can search for those other workers and then actually contact them as well, either through texting or calling them if you need to get information from them. In terms of getting a hold of the dispatcher, if the dispatcher has their information, their phone number associated with them in the project, then on that assignment we'll show you who the dispatcher was, and their name will be tappable to be able to call them to get information from them. But in terms of actually sort of sending in a request for other equipment or resources or information, that ability is not really there. Honestly, it's not really on our roadmap right now to do something like that, but what I would say is that's another great example for the ideas site to really see what other people are looking for and help get that information for us to see if it's something we need to dig into. Yeah. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yep. Gotcha. So the question was, you talked to somebody in the showcase, and you know the relationship of Workforce and Tracker isn't quite clear to you. You probably talked to James, which is why you're confused for it. So, hey-o. So the relationship between the two, of them is sort of this. Think of Workforce as sort of our, it's more like our second generation location tracking. It drops a point, if you enable it for a project, it drops a point based on the delta time that you set up, say every 30 seconds. It works in both the foreground and the background, but there's several things it doesn't work for, right, and handle, and some of those include you know, varying speeds and so forth. So it was sort of our first take on it. Tracker is a new solution for doing location tracking, and it's separate and distinct from Workforce. So on the new project that we're working on for Workforce, what we're actually going to be doing is removing the location tracking capability from Workforce and relying just on Tracker for it. We'll be providing a way to easily get from Workforce to Tracker to be able to set that up. There's a bunch of reasons about why we pulled that out into a separate app and done it separately, and I'm more than happy to go into those, but we can take that offline to dig into it. But they are related to one another in a very loose way. But we do see a lot of workflows in terms of people wanting to be able to track the location and where workers have gone that have nothing to do with workforce management. So that's why we pulled those separately. So instead of it being tightly coupled to workforce for location tracking and forcing anyone who wants to do location tracking to use workforce, we took that capability out, improved it, and put it into Tracker. Is the short answer. But we can go into more details if you want to come up afterwards and dig into it, maybe for your specific use case. So thanks everybody for attending. James and I are going to stick around while we allow the next presenters to get ready. So if you have other questions, come on up. We're happy to answer them as we're going through stuff. And enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.